welcome to the second episode of the Justice Be podcast, which is how the Dino does it. So I'm here with Rudy from Inclusive Action for the City. And Rudy, if you would like to introduce yourselves.
Hey, Carolina, thanks for having me. My name is Rudy. I serve as the Executive Director of Inclusive Action for the City, based here in Los Angeles.
Awesome. So I guess we can start off with the question, what is Inclusive Action for the City? Like, what is it? Is it a nonprofit? Is it a community-led economic group? How would you describe Inclusive Action for the City?
Yeah, Inclusive Action is a nonprofit community development organization. We're a certified community development financial institution, which means that we are dedicated to providing loans and capital to communities that historically don't have access to it. We're based in LA, where our office is in Boyle Heights, and we do work primarily in low-income areas of Los Angeles County. And I've been working at Inclusive Action for 9.5 years. I was one of the founders of the organization 13 years ago, so I've been with the organization for quite a while, and I really care about it, and I care about the people that work here.
That's awesome. So you said you started working there 9 years ago. That was the inception of Inclusive Action for the City, right?
No, the funny thing is, Carolina, is that, well, it's not funny, but the way it worked out is that the organization was established in 2009.
Okay.
And the origins of it was essentially a group of friends here in LA that were doing really cool things, and basically we got together to talk about the issues that our communities were facing. And over a course of a series of lunches and dinners and us hanging out, we decided, hey, you know what, we should probably create a space for us to do some work together beyond our day jobs. So when we first created the organization, it was an entity to convene other people, but it didn't have staff. It was fully volunteer. And then 3 or 4 years into that, I came to a place in my career where I was like, this is my favorite meeting of the month. Like, I love hanging out with these people. I love the space, the freedom, and the ability to create a different approach to community development. And so I left my job that I had at that time and said, I'm going to commit myself full time to it. And so I came off the board in the volunteer organization and then became a staffer. That was 9.5 years ago.
Wow. So, you start off in LA. Are you from LA? Were you raised there for a significant portion of your life?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in East LA, and I was raised in West Covina, which is a suburb of the city, about 30 minutes east. And I was there until I was 17, and then I went to UC Riverside, and I was in the Inland Empire for a while, and then I came back to UCLA to go to school to get my graduate degree, and then I've been in LA ever since. So I've been in LA for more than about half of my life now, in LA city proper, and in the city of Los Angeles.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about your journey. What was your degree in? How did you get started in this work? What was your undergrad? What was the UCLA major? What kind of led you here?
Well, Carolina, I answered that question talking about my family and my mom. So my parents migrated to this country from Mexico. And my mom has a 3rd grade education. My dad has a 2nd grade education, and they met here, or they met in an English class, allegedly. And my mom came when she was 18, and she married my dad, and then she had me and my brother. But my mom ended up raising us on her own. So I grew up in a household that was I guess scarred by an alcoholic father. My dad was just not up to, he just wasn't prepared and ready to be a family man. And so my mom dealt with a lot of things, and she had the courage to say, you know what, I need to take care of my kids, and I'm going to do this on my own. And she was a waitress. She was a server in a restaurant for 35 years. And that's how she took care of me and my brother. So I always say that first, because that was what impacted my career. Because growing up with my mom working in the food industry and coming home and really stressed out working in the food industry, not making a lot of money, always stressed out about if she missed one day of work, how that was going to impact her ability to pay rent. I grew up in that environment. I could still feel the stress of my mom coming home and worried about missing, or the customer's not tipping properly or whatever it is. Like everything mattered. So when I was growing up, my goal was to get rich. I wanted to get rich. Like I was going to be the first in my family to go to college, but the whole intention was to make money, Carolina, because I was like, I need to help my mom. And so because of that, I majored in business at UC Riverside. I didn't have a guidance counselor to tell me what to do. I was like, I need to make money, so I'm gonna just pick business. I assume if you have a business degree, you're gonna get rich, right? So when I was at UCR, halfway through my 4 years there, I took an ethnic studies class, and the ethnic studies class changed my life. And the experience that I had of learning in that class about who I was and where I come from in the community that I'm part of, being part of Chicano student programs at UC Riverside, like that changed my trajectory of my career. And I really got focused on, hey, it's not about my family getting rich anymore. Like I'm realizing that a lot of people don't have resources, and so I want to figure out how we could all get rich. Like how do we share resources better, and what can I do to advocate for better ways to make sure that other families that have the same dignity that my mom has can live better lives. And so that was like the beginning of my journey.
Yeah. Shout out to UCR Chicano students programs, because they're actually the first of any of the UCs to ever have that kind of resource center. And I know UC
I didn't know that.
They were the first, even though, UC Berkeley was the first, like UC and UCR was an extension of the research that they were doing. Oops. That they still didn't even have a Chicano student program until this year. They just at UC Berkeley.
I didn't know that. Yeah, no, I mean, UCR, like, I went to UCR, was the only UC that accepted me. And so I was like, I'm gonna go there, and like, I wouldn't change a thing. The people there, like in my classmates and the other people that I met through the Chicano Student Programs office, like really shaped my mind at that time. And I'm not as connected with them anymore, and I wish I was, but like I always credit that. And I'm a big sort of booster and fan of ethnic studies, because I think that it helps everyone know who they are and like how we fall in like the context of history that we were in, you know what I'm saying? And so anyways, that was a pivotal moment for me.
That's awesome to hear. I mean, so much of your story like resonates, like having the single mom just working to provide for like a normal, household to some people, but when it's just one person, it's really hard to handle, and seeing that stress on them is like, it really shapes your viewpoint of the world, and like how, like makes you think of different ways of how you can help people who are probably in the same kind of like situation or had the similar upbringing as you.
I mean, yeah, and I think that that's something that I think about too, is that like I had my mom did good. She worked really hard, and she really worked hard to keep my brother and I on the sort of on the right path. But what we experienced is actually very similar to a lot of people that look like us, and a lot of people have even had worse conditions and experiences, but I still think that we're kings and queens, like, and society has not allowed us to show that and has taken things away from us. And I'm really passionate about making sure that people like my mom and other families have resources so they can be their best selves.
Yeah, and I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but how did like what's the inception story of Inclusive Action? So it started off as your group of friends meeting up. Was there another name for it? What was it originally called?
Yeah, in the beginning, the name, it's funny because the truth is we had like 3 or 4 different names in the beginning. And we just kept changing it. So like the first name, Carolina, I think was Los Angeles Urban Renewal Network, and LURN, LURN, the acronym. And I remember that there was a lot of there was debates within the first crew, which is like 10 of us, about using the word urban renewal. And I'm an urban planner, so after UCR, I went to UCLA and got an urban planning degree. So like I was like, urban renewal is not good, and some of us were like, yeah, I agree. And we ended up going with it because we're like, it's just a volunteer thing. It's just a group of friends. Like, who cares? You know, we just want to hang out with each other. But the first name was LA Urban Renewal Network, and then it changed because we're like, we don't want to just focus on LA. Maybe it should be, the L should be for leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like leadership for Urban Renewal Network, and then it was like another iteration. But that was the original name, LURN. We went by Learn. And when I came to work here, that was the name for the first 6 years, 5 years that I've been here, was Learn. That was what we were running with. And the first chapter of the organization, the branding was all around that. In 2019, right before the pandemic, it was like our 10-year anniversary since the first convening of the Friends. And we went through a whole rebranding. And we went through a whole, we basically resurrected all the debates around urban renewal. We got some support from some consultants that were basically interviewed our partners and our friends about what we were about. And everybody was telling us, like, we love what you're doing, but the name is really confusing, you know? And we decided that we were going to change the name. And Inclusive Action was the best name that encapsulated the vibe and the DNA of the organization. Because everything we did up to that point, like the advocacy work around street vendors, like the growing loan fund, all the other initiatives that we had was always with other people, right? Like even your work, like with Just San Bernardino, Carolina, I'm always inspired by that, because I believe that it's not about me, it's about us. It's about us working together. And if you don't have the answer, if you're working in a group, somebody probably does, you're much stronger. And so we rebranded to Inclusive Action because that's kind of our mantra. Everything that we do it with other people, you know?
Yeah. I mean, even just looking at your website, like the photos, and I feel like the color scheme even is just like so inviting, and it's just like, it really embodies like the inclusive action part of it. And none of the pictures are like stock pics, like they all are of like places in LA. They really resonate, like the vibe, inclusive action for the city.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I mean, it's intentional. I hate stock photos, because our community is so beautiful. Like stock photos, we gotta make sure to tell the story right and go out there and take pictures and showcase who we are. Not we as just our staff, but like our community and like the entrepreneurs we work with and the coalition partners, and we just had a big party on Friday for a campaign that we won. And like Carolina, like the beauty of that event was certainly not us. It was like the street vendors and their families. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Was it the one you're talking about in Mariachi Plaza?
Yes.
Oh, that must have been so awesome. And like to feel like everybody come out and celebrate is like, it's just something so great that you can't even like imagine.
Yeah, totally.
Speaking of entrepreneurs, I wanted to talk about the community-owned real estate project. So the core project that you have, because it's super interesting. If you could just like give a short bio about what that's about.
Yeah, so for folks that are listening, like Inclusive Action, as I mentioned, is a nonprofit community development organization, and we do two major things. We do advocacy work. So we're involved in campaigns like the effort to legalize street vending and California Street Vendor Campaign and Senate Bill 972. We do a lot of coalition work in LA. And then we have a second arm, which is about capital. And so it's really about making sure people have resources for their businesses and their families. And we've been doing small business lending for several years. And that's why the Treasury certified us as a CDFI, because they were like, you guys are doing work in the community that we care about. And that's like a big piece of the work that we do. But a few years ago, Carolina, businesses, we were seeing that some of our clients were struggling to stay in their places where they will operate. They may have had a lease with their owner, and maybe it sort of elapsed, and they were concerned that they were going to be displaced. So we began having conversations with other partners about what are we going to do about gentrification. Sometimes the first victims of gentrification are small businesses, and there isn't any protections for them in California. There's no rent control. A lot of businesses don't have leases. So their rent can go up dramatically in only 1 month with no limit.
Wow.
So we basically conceived of the idea of like, well, one way to make sure businesses can stay is if they own property. And so CORE is that. CORE stands for community owned real estate. And the idea is let's acquire commercial real estate and help these businesses stay. And not only should we help them stay, but let's figure out ways for them to become owners of these spaces. So the initiative started about 2018, even earlier than that. But we acquired 5 buildings in 2019. And so we own 5 buildings. We own them with 2 other nonprofits, East LA Community Corporation and Little Tokyo Service Center. So we basically partnered up, again, i.e. Inclusive Action. And we're like, let's do this together. And that's what that project is about. It's about preservation. And it's about making sure that the community members, the entrepreneurs in this case, have the agency and the ability to stay.
That's awesome. I mean, that sounds like something too that's so new and like innovative, like something that probably hasn't been done around, even California. Like it's kind of a out of the box kind of thinking to solving that problem. That issue is like just gaining those buildings. You must have had a lot of obstacles and like learning experiences. Like what was something that was needed to learn that you didn't know, or like how was it kind of stepping into this like unknown territory?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I like working here, because I feel like there's a lot of freedom to try and experiment, right? And to a certain extent, I think, I don't know if you feel like this, got to in your work, but like, we have to take a risk because there's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we want to help people, it's like you can't really operate with hesitancy too much. Like, you have to be bold. And I think with this project in the beginning, we wanted to work on this. Like, we wanted to try it. Like, there wasn't a fear necessarily, but I think we were novices. Obviously, we didn't know what we were doing. And I think the big challenge in the beginning was convincing people with resources, that we could pull it off.
Yeah.
Like, that's like the thing that's probably really hard for most people on any project. It's like, if it's your first time doing it, why would somebody give you money to do it? And the way we got around that is with the partnerships. With our other 2 partners, they have a lot of experience. They're amazing. We love them. And so they have experience. And so it was easier to raise resources because we're like, oh, we're partnering with these big brothers, these big sisters that are helping us. And so that kind of like was a risk. It helped manage the risk on a project like that. The other stuff with the real estate thing is that there's a lot of like talk right now around land trust and like community and ownership and collective buying and all these things. But at the end of the day, like the day-to-day work is like really transactional. And that's the part that I think we're still learning about. So it's more than just buying the building. It's also making sure that the tenants pay their rent. And like, you need that because how else are you going to pay the loan on the building, right? And how do you collect the rent in a way that is just, that is sort of just and also like kind, but is also like pushing people like, hey guys, if you can't pay the rent, like we got to figure out a different way, because if not, we're going to lose the whole building, So those are really tough conversations that I don't think we were prepared for. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of uncharted territory, and you have an obligation to fulfill with the lender, but at the same time, you're trying to do something like radical and different.
Right, and we don't want to kick anybody out, so it's like we haven't yet to date, actually, to be honest, which is good, but like it's hard,
Yeah,
because you're like, oh man, like during the pandemic, it was hard because a lot of people couldn't pay their rent, and so we had to think creatively about how do we keep people here, but then we also got to fulfill the resources that are not coming in, and so we basically had to raise resources and fundraise and put people on payment plans,
Mm.
We went above and beyond and still are, but that's stuff that nobody really taught us. So we just have to figure it out as we go, you know? Things like maintaining the buildings, like the plumbing or like whatever it is, like the roof has a leak. Like how do you you know, so no one really teaches you that in
Yeah,
school. Like you just got to figure it out as you go.
exactly. Yeah. I think that's another question I had is like on acquiring these properties, like did you just kind of like work with a commercial real estate agent and just kind of tour certain properties? Like how did you figure out which buildings were a yes or which buildings are a no, they need too much rehab work? Like was there a strategy with that? Or how did you guys go about that?
Yeah, so you know, we talked to other people that were trying to do something similar, had done things in the past, like around land trusts.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, we were not sure. We had like a cast a wider net of what neighborhood we wanted to buy properties in.
Mhm.
But then, as we started to shop around, we did get a real estate broker, and it was like literally like, all right, we like this person, and like they're going to help shop around with us.
Mhm.
So they would imagine like you and I, Carolina, and then like the broker's like, hey guys, there's a building over here. Do you want to come check it out? All right, Carolina, let's go check it out. And it was like, we were just seeing how much does it cost? What could happen in the building? Are there existing tenants? What do they do? Are they mission aligned? So as we were going through the process, we were refining what we needed.
Mhm.
Um, so I remember that I was looking at spaces in South LA. South LA has a lot of empty buildings, some buildings that I think are beautiful that no one has really, they're just there. And we decided as we were going through the process, we're like, you know, they're a little far. And maybe it's better for this first round to focus on the east side because we're all based here.
Mhm.
And if we buy buildings that are close to each other, they'll be easier to manage in case something goes wrong, right? So through the process of looking around, we began to refine our selection process. Um, the we also had a limited budget, so that also helped refine. And then we had a mission. So like we were looking at certain types of properties that could house certain businesses. So
Mhm.
for example, one time we went to go look at a building in Bohol and it had a cannabis dispensary. So I remember my colleague Tom from Genesis LA, which was our lender and has been great to work with. I love Tom, and Tom and I went to go check it out, and I was like, Tom, dude, this is like a good business right here, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you bring in a lot of money.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't know, like we should find out who the entrepreneur is here, and like I don't know. And so it was funny because he was just like, Rudy, I think this might be that we might not be able to go this far because of funding, and we have to consider the you know the federal cannabis is still legal at the federal level, and we were using a tax credit it's federally designated, so that would have prevented us from getting that building. So there were certain things like going through the process of like, oh, can we do this, that helped refine our vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, just thinking about like, how to go about this if like people were to replicate this project, like, there's no guidebook on this, right? It's just like purely your trial and error and like figuring things out and experimenting with different things. I was also wondering, like, during your time of acquiring the buildings, like, did you ever work with anyone who was like a developer or somebody who owned like a significant portion of like certain blocks? Or did you ever come across people like that? Or was it just specifically your commercial real estate lender or real estate agent?
We didn't work with the outside developer, but my two partners are nonprofit developers. So like they build affordable housing. So like they definitely had a lot of experience around that stuff. We didn't, so that was why they were partners, because like they knew a lot more. And like, so the buildings that we acquired, three of them required a lot of tenant improvements. Like we needed to build it out.
Yeah.
And or there was a lot of disrepair, and like it was not good. We needed to fix it. So both of them had a lot of experience in like doing those kind of projects, and so that was really helpful for us, you know.
Hmm.
I think it would have been harder to partner with the private developer because the private developer would have had a different goal.
Hmm.
With my partners with LTSC and ELAC, we had the same goal: small business preservation and community ownership, right?
Hmm.
And so if they were trying to help get through a construction project, they were obviously trying to save money, but they also were not trying to like make it into a way where they were going to enrich themselves. Whereas a private developer might have a different goal. They may say, well, dude, like, you know what, Carolina, this building is amazing. Like, what if we did like luxury lofts here, and, you know, and we'll make a ton of money and then we'll give a little bit back to charity. Like, that's how a lot of them think. And so that it would have been harder to work with somebody like that because the goals are different.
Yeah, you have to make sure that the missions are aligned. So, and you already had like other partners who were kind of more on that same page and had that experience where you probably didn't need to go the private developer route.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you though that like I do think there's a role for the private developer. I just haven't, I'm interested in that. Like, I don't know what that is, but like, I think that there's a role for those people because they know a lot, right? And like, I would be interested in exploring that, but I think that the key thing, even in the future scenario, is making sure that whoever's like owner is like aligned. Like, you have to be on the same page, otherwise it's going to cause drama. You know?
Yeah. Were you ever approached by any developers saying like, hey, we'll help you, you know, if there's a way that we could get in on this, or you know, were there any kind of like deviations to your original plan, and like how did you manage that?
There wasn't, you know why? Because we didn't tell anybody.
That's
So
good.
like that, so we didn't tell anybody about this project. Like, we didn't even tell anybody until like 2020 or 2021 after we acquired.
Wow. Was that pre
And
or post COVID? Like,
so we acquired like right before COVID. So it was like 3 months or 4 months before COVID. And then the COVID came, and then we were all just distracted trying to make sure communities like were not sick and like had resources. But we didn't really talk about core publicly until like late 2020, so like a year later. So we didn't get developers hitting us up because we didn't announce this to anybody. We didn't say we're trying to buy buildings like together and it's going to be awesome. I typically favor that approach because I don't like to talk about things that are not real, you know? So I'd much rather us like, let's work on this, let's figure this out, and then acquire, and then we could talk about it. As opposed to like making a whole big like thing and then like it doesn't happen. It may not even happen.
True.
So I think that in this next phase, because Inclusive Action is interested in doing more, like we may have a different approach, you know, because we need to promote it and get resources and stuff. But
yeah. So, you know, with all these buildings that you have, like what does success look like for this project? Like, does it include buying more buildings? Does success look like just having more variety in the types of small businesses? You know, what is like the vision of success for the project?
well, the vision of success is that number one, these buildings stay in the hands of local small businesses. And that's defined into, could be defined as like these businesses stay in our long-term tenants, or it could be that some of them become owners. And so that is the second thing. So the first one is making sure people can stay. The second thing is creating a pathway for those tenants that want to be owners, for them to become owners of the building. And that's something that we're going to be working on over the next 2 years, is creating that mechanism. The way we finance and acquire these buildings gives us a 7-year pathway until we refinance the whole project. So in 2025 or so is when we'll refinance everything, and at that point we'll want to introduce new owners to some of these buildings with tenants that want to, you know. So the goal is really preservation of businesses and spaces for them, and the second is to create ownership opportunities.
Yeah, and that's so great. You don't really see that anymore. Like the lease to own model is just kind of like somehow just disappeared. It's just like dissolved away, and was probably one of the best like routes to get people into like the middle class, and it just kind of like evaporated. Who else was like your biggest advocate during all of this? Like, you know, this is new, and you know, you said banks kind of like have trouble, or they're a little bit hesitant, to lend on these projects that are new, like in that, you don't know what you're doing. And it helped to have like a bigger group to get on that loan. But like, were there anybody in any other areas that were like advocating for this to happen, like apart from community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was. I mean, I think our lenders, great, Genesis LA, like they were really important to us and have been to date, like to take a risk on a project like this. They were allocated these tax credits, these new markets tax credits, and usually lenders like them invest in other types of projects. They don't invest on a risky thing like this. They invest in something that's a little bit more standard, like affordable housing or a
Yeah.
shopping mall or something. They certainly wouldn't invest in like this like unorthodox community ownership thing. Like they would, so for them to roll the dice and since we're down, like that's huge, for us. There was also other funders, Carolina, like advocates in philanthropy that were like, this is really important. Like B Solis, rest in peace, from the California Endowment. Like B would you know, she was like making phone calls for us.
Wow.
And it's like, it was cool that like, man, like she was really valuable. And like, I told people at her sort of recognition recently when they sort of honored her life that, yo, like, I don't know if we would have gotten these buildings without her, because she was like, I totally get it. And like, I'm going to call these other people and be like, you better contribute to this thing and help them do it, So like, there's always like somebody out there that has been helpful to us in that way, And so that's a person that comes to mind as someone that was like in philanthropy, that was like, I know this is risky, and like, but these three organizations are really good, and they trust each other. Like, give them some money, like they need to get a down payment. Like,
Yeah,
let's contribute, And so, yeah, that was awesome.
that's awesome. Um, just a question too, like, so when you approached Genesis LA, you came to them with the project, like, and presented it as also a lease to own thing, and they were down with that? Or was it just like, that part of the development was like, explained later?
It was a little bit of both, like, well, it was in the beginning, it was just vision,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was just like, what if this could happen? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
would it take? Like, this is what the community needs, opportunities like this. And the idea was formulated over lunch, a few lunches, It was built on friendships and relationships. And like, and I had, we had meetings with Tom from Genesis LA, and it was just us kind of brainstorming, Carolina. It was nothing more than that in the beginning. And it was like, oh, like there's a vision for this. And like, how would we pull it off? And oh, like Inclusive Action is interested in acquiring buildings, but we're too little at that time. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
what if we partner with two other friends and then together we could do it? Okay, cool. Now we're talking. Let's get them together.
Mm-hmm.
Are you down? This is how it would work. It was very iterative, you know.
Yeah.
In retrospect, Carolina, like that's a headline that I always share with people, that it's not really rocket science when you think about it. Like what is needed is like persistence and people that have their ears open, you know. But like the steps that we took were not, it's like not really innovative. Like, like we got a real estate broker that was sending us listings, and we went out and looked at them and kind of like thought about like, all right, well, obviously we looked at the financials and the analysis and all those things, but those steps are pretty standard, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we talk about the project like it's something like new and like, innovative and everything, but the steps that you took to get there kind of just sound like, talking to people and like organizing
Totally.
your
Organizing.
community. It always
It's,
comes down to that.
it's, yeah, I believe that in everything, like I don't consider myself an organizer in the traditional sense. But like I think I use a lot of I feel like I have an organizer's mindset, in the sense of like, if you're trying to advocate for a new policy, like you're setting a vision,
Mhm.
you're meeting with the people that can help you get to that place, you're organizing other people to help make the case, you're following up every day or every week, you're putting together materials to help build your case, you're following up more and more, you're organizing other people, you're following up more and more. Like
Yeah.
that's all it is. And it's the same thing with real estate.
Mhm.
It just has more numbers involved in financials, but
You know,
it's kind of
still
the same thing.
you still have
Yeah,
contracts, you still have, negotiations, like,
totally. You still need lawyers to help you with legal analysis, and like,
yeah.
you need to find, in our case, we need tenants, but in any advocacy campaign, you need people that are impacted to tell their story and to make sure that it works for them. Like it's all the same stuff.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, speaking on policy, I know that Inclusive Action does something called like Free Lots Angeles, like play on Los
Hmm.
Angeles, right? And San Bernardino has, plenty of lots that are empty just like to spare. So I think, if you could tell us a little bit about like what exactly that policy is like aimed to do, and why is it needed in LA? Like you would think LA doesn't have a lot of empty lots because everyone's buying up land, but why is this needed in LA?
Yeah, I mean, I think that free lots is a policy and initiative that really was a response to the fact that we thought that we were not using our resources wisely, like our land
Mhm.
wisely. And the way that I was brought into that work was back in I started Inclusive Action. I was like only me on the team, and my buddy Tafari, who works at Ciclavia now, was like, "Hey Rudy, there's like a crew of us that are getting together to talk about vacant lots. Like, do you want to come?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm down." And so we basically identified together the organizations at that time that there was like hundreds and hundreds of acres of vacant parcels in Los Angeles that were owned by the city and
Oh
were
wow.
vacant, just vacant. And so the idea was like, well, how do we do something about that? Like they're
Mhm.
just vacant. Like we could do stuff with that. Like we could have park space. We could have like build stuff on it. Like we should use these spaces. They're owned by the city, right? So in the beginning, we were like, oh, how do we raise awareness about this?
Mhm.
And it was like, let's do some guerrilla activations. What if we just like showed up one day and started activating it, and then activated so awesomely that the community would be like, this is great, right?
What did you guys
So
do? Like set up mini parties, like
yeah,
cookout,
kind
big
of like,
bags,
yeah,
on
we didn't have a lot of cookouts, but we had to like pop up like gardens, like shows, like we set up little stages for people to show up. We had people doing like workshops out there, like on different depending on the parcel. And we
Mhm.
did like 3 or 4 of them. I think we ended up getting permission to do all of them, like legally, quote unquote, except for maybe like one. But essentially, that was the idea, like these 1 day activations.
Mhm.
And then like as we got to like the third or fourth one, we were like, let's invite the elected official that like represents this area to come out. Oh damn, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, dude, it's vacant lot. Like, imagine what we could do if this was like he gave us keys all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
So that ended up informing a policy that is called the adopt a lot policy.
Mhm.
Adopt a lot. And basically what the city did is that they took their list of vacant lots
Mhm.
and they identify lots that you can't really build housing. Maybe it's like really shaped or whatever it is. And then they put them into this program where communities, groups, or community leaders can apply to adopt the lot.
Mhm.
And so that's like a formal process now in the city
Mhm.
where there's a list of lots and people can apply to say, hey, that's vacant, that's owned by the city. I want to be the steward of that parcel.
Mhm.
And we've done like 3 of them already, I think, that have gone through the process. It's pretty cool. I mean, it kind of got stalled a little bit during the pandemic, but it's coming back
Yeah.
now.
What are the parcels being used for now?
The latest one is in El Sereno on the east side, and it's like it's like a garden. It's like a series of garden plots. Our partners at KDI, they basically created a menu
Mhm.
of um, of things. So like, let's say Carolina, you and I want to adopt a lot. We apply, We go through a vetting process, and then they choose us because we're awesome. So they're going to choose us to activate the lot.
We make a great
And then,
team. So
yeah, I know, totally. And then they're going to give us a menu of things. There's like 10 to 15 like pre-approved things we could do.
okay.
And then we pick those things and make it work. But there's like, like garden boxes, the stage thing is for sure one. Like there's several other things. And
Mhm,
Katie, I created some really affordable like furniture that
mhm,
you can use to like make the lot into something like a gathering place.
mhm. Wow, that would be really awesome if every, empty parcel was just like turned into like a gathering space, or just had like seating, or like a makeshift like amphitheater type of thing, and like the things that people could do, like poetry shows, like
Totally, all of it. Could be a space for small businesses, could be a bunch of things. I think that like most cities, I don't want to say most, but at least some of the big cities have a lot of land. And
mhm,
sometimes don't even know that they own it. Like because the people that work in the city government are just like they're busy, like they're doing their other projects, and they may not know that wait a minute, we have the keys to that parcel and we own it. And if we're able to democratize that data a little bit more and create pathways for community members to do something with it, that could be really amazing because people have great ideas.
yeah. So is the information that the city is providing, do you think that's pretty easy access now, or could it be improved a bit? Like, is it to the point where you could like log into like some government portal and be like, oh, like this is a map of the city, and like it highlights the lot numbers that are empty?
It's my colleague Lyric would know the answer to that question, but I know for a fact that the parcels are now public. That while we were doing this, the mayor's office and the city controller began to populate the parcels that were owned by the city,
Mhm,
and it is public. It is publicly available, and I think that stuff is like there's just a lot of opportunity, because I think that one role is for the city and the government to make these things available, but
mhm.
there's also another function that we need to make sure the community members know that it's there. Like you could have a well of water with the super tastiest water, but if nobody knows that the well is there, no one's going to drink it. So there's investments that are required in building the system, and then there's investments that are required to make sure that our community knows that they can go and get it and how. You
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the information like is there, I'm pretty sure, like in most counties, but it's the systems are outdated, or it's like the parcels are only made available, when there's like an excess land sale or something, or it's all like kind of circumstantial and like not available all the time, which kind of probably hinders to like it stops community taking over the land, like, and stops these kinds of like smaller community led projects like from happening. um
Yeah.
and it would be really awesome if it was just like all, you could do it over the computer, or like you could have access to it all the time, or if the city even like advertised like, hey, this lot is empty, like apply here to do something with it, like right then, right on the parcel, so everybody in the community would know. But apparently that's not, people are busy in the city, and it's not like a priority probably to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, I guess we have to identify what's a priority and what's not. I think that this stuff is, I think it is, I think making sure people have information is a priority, you
Mhm.
know, and making sure that people know what the government does and what it doesn't is really helpful and necessary. And, right now in LA, Carolina, we're going through a mayoral race, and there's a lot of misinformation, and it's being perpetuated by the media. Certainly, we've seen it at the federal level. And
Mhm.
part of it is because I think people don't know what data they should believe, like they don't know where to go for data. So they're just going to go and see what's on their phone.
Mhm.
And I think we have a lot of work to do to make sure that people know the truth and know where they can get resources, and also have confidence that those resources are the right ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess for like the future of inclusive action for the city, like, I guess before that, like, what is probably the biggest win or like the biggest success you would say that you've gotten? I mean, you work on a lot of things, like from like physical real estate to policy. Like, out of everything that you've done, probably from the beginning of inclusive action, like what was probably the biggest win or the most like satisfactory like item of success that you had?
I don't know how to, I mean, I think there's a lot of great things that we've done.
Yeah.
I think my close friends and certainly my team knows that I'm never really satisfied. I think we're just beginning, and I think there's a lot of work to do, but it's hard for me to tell you like what's the best, coolest thing that we've done. Cause I mean, even some of the loans that we've offered to people, Carolina, like you can feel it sometimes when someone gets like a $20,000 loan to like get their business off the ground or to get some equipment that they needed. You can feel that changed their life. And so like that's very important to like, that's like, wow, like that's awesome that we were able to facilitate that and make that connection. We have things like this, and then we have other political wins like Senate Bill 972 that the governor signed a couple weeks ago, which is, I think, is going to impact thousands of food vendors all over California. And like, that's huge, and that's also important. I don't know, like all of it is good,
Yeah, it's true. It's
All
like
of it,
you pick one, something like somebody getting a loan of, $20,000 and like feeling that changes their lives, but that's also probably on the same level as like owning 7 buildings. It's like a, how can you pick your favorite child type of situation?
a little bit, yeah. I mean, I think, a couple hours ago in our team meeting, my colleague Norma was talking about a rental assistance program. So we don't do rental assistance, but like this year, a lot of the families that we're helping through our loan program are struggling with rent that they've accrued during the pandemic. And so we said, you know what, let's work with United Way and let's get some rental assistance out to people. And so she was telling us about this, Carolina. I'm like, dude, that's a family's going to get 2 or 3 months of their rent paid. Like, I think that's very critical. That's like, it could ensure that they're not stuck in a cycle of poverty and they got a little bit of a chance to get out of this. And like, that's really valuable, and but despite all these things, I'm always reminded that it's not enough at this time. Like, we still got to keep going, and we have to celebrate, but we also have to stay focused and locked in that we are in a huge tidal wave of crisis and suffering, and we're in a little boat. And we got these 5 buildings, and we're lending to people, and we're trying to pass some policies, but like, we have to keep thinking bigger. And we have to think bigger with other people, and like that's like where my mind is usually.
Yeah, I mean, like it sounds already from the beginning, it's been kind of like developing into these different things, and like as community needs change, like it sounds like inclusive action for the city is also going to need to change a little bit to kind of meet those. And maybe we started off at A, but now we offer like C, D, and like E, like the branches kind of change based on what people need. And I think that's a good approach to things, because if you're going to be constant in the community, like you want to be able to kind of like develop these other like arms as well.
Agreed. I think so. I mean, I think we can't stay stagnant, we have to adapt. And I mean, all these things that, yeah, it's like, I think the community will continue to tell us like what's going on and what we need to do,
Yeah. So I guess the last question is just, what is the legacy that you hope to leave with inclusive action for the city?
This is also like a tough question. I really often talk about working ourselves out of a job. And I really want to get to a place where we're not needed as much. And during the pandemic, we basically stopped lending to people because we're like, this is like, we need to get people cash. Like, they don't need a loan, like they need to get some money. And so we put together a street vendor emergency fund, and we raised like 1.5 million, and all that money went out to vendors. And man, the partnerships were just dope. We like had drive-through like cash like delivery. It was just like, it was nuts. And I was in this talk, I mean, and some guy was like, oh, like you guys need to do more of this. You guys need to be all over the city doing this stuff. And it was really nice. It was a compliment, but I was like, sir, no. Like, it's a problem that these vendors, we ended up serving like 2,500 vendors. It's a problem that they have to rely on a very tiny organization to help them. Like, that's a problem that our city and our county don't have any services and infrastructure for them. Like, that's a problem, dude. So I don't want to be all over the city. I'd rather not do it at all. Like, I'd rather us being like, oh, we're good. Like, you lost your job, Carolina, we're in a global pandemic. Like, we're going to take care of you. You're not going to have to worry about paying your rent. Like, that's, to me, is like the ultimate goal. And if we could be a bridge to that future through inclusive action, like, that's like the legacy that I want to leave, is like the idea that we should be working ourselves out of a job and building systems that don't need us at all.
Can I just say that's such an organizer mindset, is to like, the role of the organizer is to organize so that they can leave and the area in which they were organizing can continue to thrive and be successful. That's such an organizer mindset. But yeah,
I believe it. I'm even if it shoots us in the foot, like, I think some organizations are like, well, Rudy, like, then how are you going to pay your team members if, like, you don't get that, I'm like, I don't want to pay. Like, that's the whole idea. Like, we signed up to do this to change the world. Sounds like cheesy, but I really feel that in my heart, like, we started to lend because we knew that nobody was going to lend to street vendors. That was like the origin of the loan fund. And so we ideally would want them to be able to walk into Bank of America and be honored that, wow, the elotero's here. Let me get the appointment right now. Let's go. Come on, senor, sit down. What do you need? That, to me, is success. And because that doesn't exist, we're here to serve them. And I hope that one day they could go to Bank of America like that and be treated like kings and queens,
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And your, inclusive action for the city continues to like inspire people like all over California. I know Just SB is super inspired by your story, and like, hopefully we can do something like that in the future too.
You will.
Yeah.
No, listen, I'm inspired by just San Bernardino, and I think that I see a lot of our communities moving that way, and we're connected. And I'm really committed to helping you as best as I can and helping the coalition there. And like, I appreciate the invitation to this podcast, and I'm excited for the future.